welcome to my home. Enter freely of your own will and leave behind some of the happiness you bring, as today we will be learning about Victor Erice's Spirit of the Beehive. Victor Erice, born on June 30th, 1940 in Spain. He was born right at the beginning of Francisco Franco's 36-year-long dictatorship, exactly 1 year after the end of the Spanish Civil War. The era of Franco's regime was a dark time for the country, coming out of a bloody civil war in which neighbors and family members murdered one another. Victor was born into a desolate country that was oppressed in every aspect. He grew up in an environment full of fear and disappointment from the people who lost the war. However, as he was growing up in this environment, he found refuge from his bleak reality in cinema. He has often said that when he discovered movies, he found a country called cinema, a country that did not ask him for a passport or a declaration of intent. The world of cinema allowed him to expand his horizons, transcend the limitations of his reality, the humble nature of his origins, and it allowed him to become a citizen of the world. He has stated multiple times that the film that left the greatest impact on him as a child was James Whale's Frankenstein, a film which filled him with questions and wonder, particularly after witnessing the scene in which the creature meets the little girl, Mariah. Flash forward a few decades, Victor, now as a grown man, found himself living at the tail end of Francisco Franco's dictatorship. These final years of the dictatorship were also known as the Dicta Blanda, which means soft dictatorship. This period was a pullback from the extreme censorship of the time, which allowed Spirit of the Beehive, his 1973 directorial debut, to exist in the first place. Originally envisioned as a straight adaptation of Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein, which unfortunately he could not complete due to a lack of substantial budget, Spirit of the Beehive is set in 1940, exactly 1 year after the end of the Spanish Civil War, and right at the beginning of Francisco Franco's fascist regime, when the life of a little girl named Anna is shaken up and interrupted by a traveling truck carrying cans of film into her little villa. After witnessing a screening of James Whale's 1931 Frankenstein, little Anna is left with many questions and begins to view her environment with more curiosity. Filled with many questions posed by the film, Anna eventually escapes her home to go into the countryside of war-torn Spain in a quest to find Dr. Frankenstein's gentle creature. The film, at its core, it's a condemnation of fascism, an exploration of the aftermath of the war through the eyes and point of view of a child and those who lost the war, but it's also a film about cinema and the love of cinema. Victor has stated on multiple occasions that Spirit of the Beehive is a retelling of his childhood. It can be said that Anna is Victor's avatar in the movie, as he used her character to recreate key memories from his childhood, such as watching Frankenstein for the first time. Having been born in 1940, Victor, who is still alive during the making of this video, has been alive for most of the existence of film as a medium. He's talked about how he remembers when having synchronized sound was a very impressive and difficult feat. Perhaps this is why Spirit of the Beehive has such a minimalist sound design, with a very subtle score that is used sparingly, consisting of a single track that serves as a leitmotif for the film's more spiritual and strange aspects. Despite the film's laconic nature and obvious lack of music throughout, the movie relies on environmental sounds presented in a rhythmic way to evoke a very specific mood and era in the audience. The sound design works in a symphonic and melodic way, like the wind blowing and the clock ticking, the train and everything else in the environment, putting the audience in a very specific, desolate place ruled by fascism, where hopelessness runs rampant. The most notable sounds throughout the film are the projector running during the screening of Frankenstein at the beginning of the movie, which creates a very romantic depiction of a movie projection, and the hauntingly beautiful, melancholic sounds of the train. It is worth noting that both trains and cinema were the most notable inventions of the 19th century. The sound of films from that era was mostly recorded in post-production, including dubbing. At the time, women were used for their high-pitched voices to dub the dialogue for every child character, whether they were male or female. Spirit of the Beehive, however, took a more naturalistic approach, allowing the two little actresses who play the sisters in the film to record their own dialogue and keep their own voices. It was revolutionary to hear the actual voice of a child in a movie during that era in Spain, and at the same time, seeing characters like Anna and her sister whispering on film and still being able to understand what they were saying was just as revolutionary.
Isabel, cuéntame lo que me vas a contar. La película. Ahora no, mañana. Ahora me lo has prometido. Porque el monstruo mata a la niña y porque le matan luego a él.
The sound design was developed in Italy, and despite its very minimalist approach, it revolutionized how sound on film was done at the time, showing that technical or financial limitations are no excuse and that very few resources can still render an interesting sonic landscape. However, the most interesting aspect of the sound of this film is ironically its silence, because as Victor Erice himself would put it, what sound films discovered was the importance of silence, because silence cannot be truly appreciated as a narrative element without sound.